Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Thoughtful Bro. I am so happy to speak to Alan Lightman today. His book, Einstein's Dreams, is one of my favorite books ever, one of the books that made me want to become a writer. So before I go on any more about Alan, I want to do some introduction, but so excited to have him here today. As you know, The Thoughtful Bro, it live streams on A Mighty Blaze, on Facebook and YouTube. Thoughtful Bro is here every Tuesday at 2 to talk about what makes great books tick, what makes great authors tick. And A Mighty Blaze is an all-volunteer initiative that connects writers and readers virtually. At A Mighty Blaze, we're never asking for money, but if you want to show us the love, you can just tell your friends about us, follow us, retweet us, repost us, all the things on the internet. If you do want to spend money, though, I have an idea for you. You could spend it on books that reward you with feelings of wonder and awe, books that lie at the intersection of spirituality and science and ask questions about life's meaning in this age of technology. Books like The Miraculous from the Material by the great Alan Lightman. We're going to put some links to buy that in the chat. Please go ahead and buy through bookshop.org and support your independent booksellers. Regarding questions, go ahead and just post them in the chat as usual, and they will make their way to me. We'll try to get to some at the end. Now, a little bit more about our guest today. Alan Lightman is a novelist, essayist, physicist, and educator. He is a professor of the practice of humanities at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He's the author of 7 novels, including the international bestseller, aforementioned Einstein's Dreams, which went on to be translated into 30 languages. More than 50 independent theatrical and musical productions around the world have been based on Einstein's Dreams. That's amazing. And Alan's second novel, The Diagnosis, was a finalist for the National Book Award. He recently created a 3-part miniseries on PBS called Searching: Our Quest for Meaning in the Age of Science. I just binge watched that over the last few days. It was terrific. It was incredibly well produced. He spoke to people like the Dalai Lama and other Nobel Prize winning scientists. So really check that out. We'll put a link to that PBS show in the chat as well. But now on to the newest book. Again, The Miraculous from the Material, Understanding the Wonders of Nature. It is a gorgeously illustrated exploration of the science behind the universe's most stunning natural phenomena, from atoms to rainbows to snowflakes to spiderwebs to Saturn's rings to soap bubbles. The book explores what Lightman calls spiritual materialism, which is the belief that we can embrace spiritual experiences without letting go of a scientific worldview. So lucky to have him here today. Alan, thank you for being on The Thoughtful Bro.
Great to be with you, Mark.
Well, look, as I said in my intro, Alan, this is really exciting for me. I mean, as soon as I booked you, I was like telling people about it, and I posted about Einstein's Dreams because that book came to me at such an interesting point in my life when I was really figuring out that I think I wanted to be a writer. And that book it just really hit me. And I thought, God, I would love to have one of my books influence other people the way this book influenced me. So for that and all the other great things you've done, I'm so happy to have you here. But I just want to start there, actually, with Einstein's Dreams. So that book came out in 1993. It was your debut. The venerable institution at the New York Times, Michiko Kakutani, compared you to Borges and Calvino. This is on your debut novel. Of course, it's sold in 30 languages and all the musicals and plays that were made about it. Such a hit, Alan. I guess my question to you is, looking back, why do you think that book took off the way it did?
Well, I think one of its assets is that it's a very, very short book.
That'll do it. Oh my God!
For those of us who have reduced attention spans, it's a great book. It has very, short chapters. You can just read a chapter while you're sitting on the toilet and close it up and read another chapter later. So I think that really is a factor. I think that it's probably easy to read. Besides its brevity. And I think that it has sort of a friendly amount of science and philosophy in it. So I mean, also it got a big plug by Salman Rushdie early when it first came out. I don't really know. I mean, I know it surprised me and surprised my editor that it did well, but never know about a book unless you're a celebrity writer. You don't really know how a book is going to do.
How did you end up getting that blurb from Salman Rushdie, by the way? Do you know?
Well, when I had the manuscript of the book, I wanted to send it out, before it's published. I wanted to send it out to a few writers that I thought would like magic realism.
Mm.
And I thought of Rushdie as one of those people. And so I didn't know where Rushdie lived. I mean, at that time he was under a fatwa, so nobody knew where he lived. But I knew where his literary agent was, named Andrew Wiles in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent the manuscript to Andrew Wiles. It was like sending a note off in a bottle, on the ocean. You just, you think the probability of it landing anywhere is almost zero. So that's the way I felt about it. But Andrew Wiles forwarded to Rushdie in his hiding place.
Wow.
And Rushdie wrote back and said that he loved the book. So that was, a stroke of luck for me.
What a story. Yeah. I mean, I feel like a lot of the book publishing industry is sending things off into the void and just crossing your fingers. And it's amazing that one came back. What a great story. I have a quote from Albert Einstein, which is imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. I'm sure you've heard that quote before. We were talking a little bit in the green room about how, someone like you who sort of straddles these two worlds of the arts and the sciences, you're in such a unique position. From my perspective, of somebody who has 0 feet in the sciences and both feet in the arts, you can get the feeling in our age of Musk and Gates and Jobs that, this is a technology-driven world where all the not only all the power and the money, but all like the cultural authority is on the side of the sciences these days. And you can feel a little bit condescended to sometimes, someone making a comment, like this is a comment that you often hear just about how what is the value of a liberal arts degree, right? What is the value of an English degree? And you teach at MIT, so I'm sure you've thought about this. But I just building on that quote of Einstein's about the importance of imagination, what do you think about the value of imagination, the value of the humanities in today's world?
Well, I think the humanities help us think through our values, what's important to us, how should we live in the world. The sciences really can't answer questions like that, but history, philosophy, literature, psychology, art, those subjects help us think about who we are as people and who we want to be and how do we want to live our lives. And that's extremely important. And I think that the humanities certainly should not be left in the dust as we give more attention to our STEM subjects. It may be that the STEM subjects can lead to making more money, but life is about a lot more than just making money. It's about fulfillment and happiness and joy and feeling good about yourself. And we really need the humanities for that.
Yeah. I really do find across your work, from Einstein's Dreams all the way to this book and in your show on PBS, that you just, I think, have a soft spot for the artist, for the romantic, for somebody who has sort of, if you will, escaped the tyranny of the mechanistic view of the world. I mean, it especially came out in Einstein's Dreams, which I reread over the weekend, just the way that you seem to really come alive when you're talking about, the people falling in love and people listening to music and just looking at the world with awe and wonder. And so do you think it's fair to say that you sort of, although maybe you're hardwired as a scientist, you just feel so drawn and full of admiration for people who look at the world in that more majestic way?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I was a child, I was equally interested in the arts as the sciences. I mean, I wrote poetry and short stories and read a lot of literature as a child. So I've always valued the arts equally. with the sciences. So it's never been a question for me. My wife is a painter, and we get together with her art friends and sometimes with my science friends. So it's always been, the arts have always been a part of my life.
Let me ask you this. I was thinking about you and your meeting with your wife's artist friends. Do you feel more at home in one group or the other, like meeting with like a kind of at the lunch table of scientists, theoretical physicists at MIT, or, your wife's art friends? Like, do you feel kind of more spiritually at home or comfortable in one or the other?
Well, I feel comfortable in both groups of people. And of course, I feel very fortunate that I have been accepted in both groups of people. I think that the children often have interest in both the sciences or the arts or the rational way of thinking and the more intuitive way of thinking. And their teachers and parents and friends push them in one direction or the other, because it's easier to get through the world if you're either the rational type or the intuitive type, if you're one or the other. But I really think that children should not be pushed to go in one direction or the other.
Wait, Alan, do you mean that it's easier to get through the world if you are pigeonholed in that way?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. If you're pigeonholed, if you focus yourself in one direction or the other. But I feel equally comfortable with my wife's artist friends and with scientific colleagues, and I learn something from all of them. And sometimes my wife and I are sitting at the dinner table together, eating dinner, and she'll be talking about a problem that she's having with her painting, like the question of balance or unity or something. And I realize it's the same problem that I've been facing as a writer. And we just share that common artistic struggle. But that it's we're all partly artists and partly scientists. I mean, even though you say that you've got both feet in the arts, I think if we look closely at you, we would find that you've got a very rational side as well. And we ask questions that have answers, and we also ask questions that don't have answers. And I think both kinds of questions are a part of being human.
There's this famous quote that it's just occurring to me now. I can't remember who said it, but they were talking about the sciences and the art, and they called it non-overlapping magisteria, I think was the quote. Do you remember who said that?
Well, Stephen Jay Gould said that about science and religion.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah,
yes,
that was Stephen Jay Gould.
Yeah. So, and kind of building on that quote, there's in your PBS documentary, which is kind of all about these same things that are in this wonderful book, and those two are great companion pieces for each other. But there's this moment where you get your brain examined in this giant machine, and you can tell me what the name of that machine is, but it's like you go into this machine and you want to look at your brain activity, and you are thinking about the heavens and the stars, and you're kind of thinking about something that is very not scientific. You're almost like trying to have a spiritual experience or guide your thoughts in that way. And then you look, the guy you're with, the doctor, like examines your brain, and you ask him, what's going on there? And he says, well, right now what I see is you're not using the problem solving part of your brain, and you're using this other part of your brain. And that just got me thinking of that non-overlapping magisteria quote. Like, could it be that this old kind of age-old thing between reason and religion and all that, it's just two different parts of your brain, and you just sometimes you use one part and sometimes you use the other, and that's sort of all there is to it?
Well, I think certainly that those different kinds of ways of being in the world and experiences are all in the brain, possibly in different parts. But I do think that religion and science are different ways of being in the world. I think both of them are looking for truth. But the methods of going about finding truth, and where you find authority and evidence are different. So I don't think they're the same. I like Gould's definition of non-overlapping magisteria, because they're both, I don't know what the noun for that is, majestic in their own way. When I talk about religion, for me, it's more the experience of spirituality. And that's what religion is for me. And it may or may not involve a belief in God or a higher power, but certainly the spiritual experiences that are in the PBS series and also in the book are part of that, is just feeling part of something larger than myself. And I think all of us have that feeling at different times. All of us feel a connection to nature and appreciate beauty of one kind or another, have some kind of awe at the natural world. Those are all aspects of my version of spirituality.
Yeah. So I do want to move into talking about the book, and just kind of a neat toggle into this topic is another PBS program which I watched recently, which is the Ken Burns documentary about Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
Have you seen that yet?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard good things about it.
Oh, I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And I just think, like, Leonardo is somebody who I think would just so appreciate your work. And it's somebody I think is just very like-minded to you, and one of those rare people that is, it's sort of like the question of, like, is Da Vinci an artist or a scientist? It almost doesn't even make sense, that question.
He's both.
He's both, because he's just probing the mysteries of life in using both skills equally, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that he would just love this book in particular, because there was a great comment that somebody made in the Da Vinci documentary, which was, they were trying to say, well, what was Leonardo really all about? What was he getting at? And the idea, like, maybe the unifying thing that drove him was finding a pattern, like the patterns in nature that sort of like repeated themselves, and sort of, he said it so beautifully, but it's just this idea that there's like a unifying kind of principle in nature, in the way water flows, in the way plants grow, in the way stars shine. He wanted to try to get to that central theory. And I just feel like that is both a kind of scientific and religious type of pursuit, you know? All right, but on to this book. You talk about amazing things like mandarin fish and the rings of Saturn, and you talk about things we see every day like lightning and soap bubbles. There's a kind of an equal portion of things that are right under our nose and things that are, oh yes, and sorry, Leslie in the chat is saying that what a perfect gift this is. I wish I had mentioned that earlier. This is a great gift for the holidays, folks, just in time for that special thoughtful bro in your life. It's a wonderful gift book. But you know, there's just so many different kinds of phenomena that you explore. And as I was reading this, there's a wonderful quote from the Buddha that I was thinking about. So Buddha has this saying: "A fool understands a wise man like a spoon tastes the soup, and a smart person understands a wise man like a tongue tastes the soup." And to apply that here, when I read this book, I felt like I was walking out into nature. I feel like I'm the spoon in the soup. I feel like I just don't see what's there. But then I look at your book and I read it and I think, oh my goodness, it's just mystery below mystery below mystery.
Yeah. Well, a principal feature of the book, which your listeners probably won't be able to see, is that each of the 36 chapters starts with a full-page color photograph of a magnificent physical phenomenon, like the aurora borealis there.
Yeah, I'm just showing this for those who are listening. I am showing it online. Yeah. But so, yeah, beautiful photo.
So each chapter begins with a full-page color photograph. And we have an emotional reaction to seeing the aurora borealis, or seeing a hummingbird, or seeing a spider web, or seeing the rings of Saturn, or seeing a volcano. And then I give a scientific explanation of the thing after the picture. But the the most immediate reaction is emotional to that photograph. And of course, many of us have seen the aurora borealis in person, or a hummingbird in person, or a rainbow in person. So I think that that's where it all begins. The emotional part of our brains is actually much older than the rational thinking part of our brain.
Mm.
The emotional part of our brain is in a part called the amygdala, which is the most primitive part of our brains. And I think that's why emotional arguments always conquer rational arguments.
Mm. I never thought about it that way, but it is true.
It's a more primitive, fundamental part of the brain.
Mm. Yeah. I had another question on that note, which was that, so much of your book is, and your work is like bringing emotion into science, or sort of like explaining the science and like having trying to kind of evoke emotional reaction in the reader, which you do very successfully. I just love all these feelings of wonder and awe. It's some of my favorite kinds of feelings. And I guess my question to you is, from an evolutionary psychology perspective, do you think that there's an evolutionary advantage to humans that can feel awe and a sense of joy and beauty? Because, the evolutionary psychologists would say there's nothing in you that didn't once have some kind of purpose, right?
Right. Well, some traits that we have don't have direct survival benefit, but are byproducts of other traits that had direct survival benefit. And if we take the appreciation of beauty, both Darwin and Freud have said that our appreciation of beauty is a byproduct of sexual attraction. And the fundamental purpose of sexual attraction is procreation, reproduction. And to have successful procreation, you need to find a suitable mate. And if the mate appears healthy, if he or she has good coloring, good body shape, there's more chance that the sexual union will be successful. And so I think that our original appreciation of beauty, I mean, when I say original, I mean in evolutionary history, probably started out as a survival benefit in finding mates, successful mates. And so when we look at a rainbow, or we look at one of Leonardo da Vinci's paintings and say it's beautiful, I think that's a byproduct of the original survival benefit of appreciation of beauty.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the picture of the aurora borealis that we were just showing. And, I think I was trying to think, what is that feeling? Is it beauty? Because I was thinking, okay, so he's saying that,
it's many things.
It's many things. And I was thinking, what other feelings are there in that?
Yeah.
And I thought, part of it, I think I feel a feeling of fear as well as beauty when I look at aurora borealis, and maybe awe, this feeling of awe, or at least as it occurs for me, is a sort of blend in that case of like fear and kind of our mortality and how big the universe is compared to us. Those are sort of fearful feelings, but also beauty, right? Mixed together.
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. And I think when we look at the aurora borealis, when we look at an eclipse, we have a very visceral understanding that we are a small speck in the cosmos, that's a very big universe, and that our Earth is this ball that's floating out in space with a very large cosmos around us. And that can instill feelings of fear, can also instill feelings of awe and wonder. And yes, appreciation of how small we are. And that, of course, relates to our mortality. I think a lot of what we do, the science we create, the art we create, the institutions we build, are a defense against our mortality. that it's very hard to accept our mortality, but I think a lot of what we do is rooted in this wrestling, trying to come to terms with our mortality.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Then those are really powerful feelings. So I just want to give folks like just an example of what one of these chapters are like. You have a photo, and then there's like kind of 4 or 5 pages, sometimes even 3 pages of just a small essay that has like the science and some of the theories, scientific theories around certain phenomena. And then also just sort of often it's anecdotal. It's like an experience you had seeing something like that. It's a great book to sort of dip into and dip out of. One of my favorite chapters was on Saturn's rings. Which there were so many amazing things about that chapter, but one is, so you talk about just like how perfectly, beautifully symmetrical it is and just how precise it is. I mean, I think the diameter is a couple 100,000 miles, which is sort of similar to the distance between like the Earth and the Moon. And yet the width of Saturn's rings is like sometimes, or usually smaller than a football field, or on average, the width of a football field. Mm-hmm. So can you just explain, sort of briefly for this lay audience, how the hell can you get something that's so perfectly circular, that's so precisely thin?
Well, the circularity comes about because the different rings are orbiting material like snowballs and small rocks and so on. And if the rings were not circular, if a part of the ring was stuck out, for example, from a pure circle, it would make collisions with the rocks and other rings, mm-hmm. which would reduce it to a circle. Mm-hmm. When they're in circular orbits, the different rings don't collide with each other. So the friction between rings keeps them circular. They're so thin because of the action of the moons of Saturn. I think Saturn has a couple of hundred moons. Mm-hmm. And the gravity of all of those moons working together acts like a shepherd, herding his sheep, and it keeps the rings thin. So we think the origin of the rings is a small or not so small asteroid that broke up, or actually a small moon that got too close to Saturn and got fractured and broke up and spread into lots of little pieces that then started orbiting.
And that, Alan, was like, it was stuck in my head for days. I was thinking about this, like the way you described it. And then I actually went online and researched a little bit more. This moon that would have exploded. And I read somewhere that like that moon of ice and debris that would have been torn apart by gravity actually might have formed the rings, like an early version of the rings, right, within a matter of days. And I don't know if that's right, but I'm just saying that, like, what a thing to have observed. I mean, if somehow a human or a camera could have been on Saturn and seen a moon explode and become rings, that image was stuck in my head.
Well, I don't think explode might not be the right word. Torn apart.
Yeah.
Certainly. I mean, it's the same force that causes the tides on Earth. Mm-hmm. That part of the water that's closer to the sun and the moon gets stretched with greater force than the part that's further away, because the gravity decreases with distance. Mm-hmm. And so you get a net stretching effect. Mm-hmm. That's called a tidal force. And that's the same kind of force that would have ripped apart a moon that got too close to Saturn in the early formation of the solar system.
But just that phrase, Alan, ripping apart a moon, there's a lot of majesty in that.
Yes.
So the book is filled with gems like that, and just little bits of science and kind of things that might, make you more like the tongue in the soup rather than the spoon, where you like walk outside your house and just kind of appreciate nature a little more. I want to talk about kind of some of your spiritual beliefs. You call yourself a spiritual materialist. I think I've seen somewhere you've referred to yourself as a pantheist. You say you don't believe in miracles, but you do believe in the miraculous. Just what does that mean?
Well, I don't believe in miracles in the sense that I don't believe in the supernatural. I think that ultimately science will be able to explain physical phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
It may be 100 years or 1,000 years from now, but I think that in principle that all phenomena are explainable by science and all follow laws and rules. So, and that's the sense in which I say I don't believe in the miraculous. I mean, I don't believe in miracles. But when I say I believe in the miraculous, I mean that I am struck with awe when I look at the rings of Saturn, or when I look at a hummingbird hovering in the air, or when I look at a rainbow, that those phenomena to me are so beautiful and so awe-inspiring that I call them miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I call myself a spiritual materialist, and why I say I don't believe in miracles, but I do believe in the miraculous.
So people often go to religion because they're trying to cope with some of the unbearable aspects of being alive, like mortality or grief. These are times when religion is very helpful in terms of framing and processing some of the more terrible aspects of life. And so I'm trying to kind of understand the kind of what you just outlined in a more traditional religious framework. And I mean, I guess one way to think about that would be like, well, there's a lot of mental health aspects to being religious. And, maybe there's some unhealthy aspects too, but I'm just trying to see, like, from your perspective, could you explain, like, why is looking at the world your way something that, like, brings you mental health or kind of calm before some of the more terrifying aspects of life?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Well, I think all of us, let's just take one example of being close to nature, of walking outside in a forest or by an ocean or someplace like that, where we're close to nature, away from human-made constructions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that all of us feel a peace and a calm when we're doing that. We feel like we're back home in a sense, because if you think about our evolutionary history, 95% of it was outdoors. These air-conditioned houses and heated houses that we live in now are a very recent development in our human history. And we lived outdoors for most of our evolutionary history, and we had to develop a sensitivity to nature as a survival benefit. If you're connected to nature, it's easier to find the right place to live, to know what animals are trying to eat you and what animals you can eat, where there's a good water supply, what the weather is like. And so I think that early in our evolutionary history, maybe back as far as 2 million years ago, that we developed a sensitivity and a kinship with the natural world. And I think when we go outside and take a walk, and you shouldn't take your cell phone with you when you go out on a walk like that, I think we're feeling at some deep level, and maybe it's unconscious, this kinship that we have. And in a sense, we're back home. So I think when we experience beauty, like when we're looking at a painting or listening to a symphony or watching a ballet, the time slows down. We're in the moment, and in this modern world that we live in, aided and abetted by high-speed communication technologies, we rush around too much. We're looking at our smartphones every 5 minutes. We're checking off boxes on our to-do list. We're carving up our daily time into 5-minute units of efficiency. We're rushing around too much, and we feel we need to slow down and just be present, which is a Buddhist concept of mindfulness. And I think that when we are appreciating a painting or a symphony or a ballet, time slows down. In fact, we become unaware of time. We're just in the moment with that thing. And that's also something I think that brings us of happiness, joy, calm, peace, the other words that you were using.
Could you describe this spiritual experience that you had on a boat one time near your home in Maine? There is this PBS series you did about searching for meaning in the age of science. It begins with this experience that you had on a boat, which I think was one of the more profound experiences of your life, and certainly is germane to what we're talking about here. Can you just describe that experience?
Yes. Well, my wife and I have been very fortunate to spend our summers on a small island in Maine. There are no roads or bridges to the island, so the 6 families on the island, we all have our own boats. So I was coming back to the island, to my house on the island one night after midnight, late at night, in my boat. There were no other boats on the water. I was alone in the ocean. It was a clear night, so the stars were out. And I decided to turn off the engine of my boat so it got even quieter than it had been. And then I turned off the running lights of the boat, and it got even darker than it had been. And I just lay down in the boat and looked up. And after a few moments, I felt like I was merging with the stars. I felt like I was falling into infinity. It seems trite to use words to describe this experience. It seems overly sentimental, but you really can't put it into words. I think we've all had experiences like this where we feel like we're merging with something larger than ourselves. And I lost all track of my body, all sense of time, all sense of my ego. And I was just in this pure state of being and connected to the heavens. I don't know how long I was lying there like that, but after some time, I turned on the engine again and went back home. As I said, I think that we've all had experiences like that, maybe not that exact experience, but experiences where we feel connected to things larger than ourselves. And that's part of my understanding of spirituality.
Is that a feeling that you've tried to have again or would like to have again?
Well, I've had that experience a few times, not always in a boat looking up at the stars, but you can't force that kind of transcendent experience, but you can put yourself in a place where it's more likely to happen. Being on a noisy subway train is not likely to happen there. But for me, it takes quiet and solitude.
Yeah. There was a great bit in that PBS show where you were talking about just something to do that might kind of trigger such experiences, is just to go out into your yard and just look at like 1 square inch of grass or something, right? And just to tell us about like why just putting your face 3 inches above the ground and staring at a square inch piece of soil might be beneficial to your health.
Well, right before that scene in the PBS series, I had been talking about galaxies and the Big Bang. I was way out there.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I needed to get grounded. And there's really a lot that goes on in each square inch of soil beneath our feet. There's a whole universe there. And so I took out a magnifying glass and just very patiently began examining all the life and the little bugs and so on that were in that 1 square inch of ground. I think the larger lesson there for me is to just pay attention to the world around us. Just be present. Instead of thinking about what you did yesterday or what you're going to do tomorrow, or taking your kid to school. Just it's related to slowing down. Just be where you are at this moment. Pay attention to your body, what it's feeling. Pay attention to your surroundings. Pay attention to the things that you're hearing. And paying attention to 1 square inch of soil was a way of focusing my attention. It served the same purpose as paying attention to your breathing in meditation. I mean, some of your listeners are probably meditators, and you don't have to be religious at all to be a meditator. Not at all. But in a lot of meditation practices, you just concentrate on your breath, on the inhale and exhale. And I think looking carefully at 1 inch of soil beneath your feet is very similar to that.
I love that. So the book gets into a lot of these kind of mysteries that are sort of on the boundary of, how much we know. The PBS show does that as well. You kind of way back to the beginning of time in the Big Bang, way down to the subatomic particles, what just the absolute boundaries of kind of several fields of science, and kind of wondering what life means given the limits of what we know. I guess my question to you is this, my little cheeky question to you is like, say, God willing, this is like 50 years from now, you pass away, you go up to heaven, there's God. First of all, he says, I love your book, but actually, it really is like they say. But
I was afraid that God would tell me that it's on his remainder table.
Oh my God. So God is up there and he says, Alan, welcome to heaven. And now one of the great things about being in heaven is that you now can know the reason why, the answer to every question that you have about the world. So my question to you is, like, once you know that you now have this power, what's the first place you look? What's the first question you want answered?
Well, that's a wonderful question you're asking me. Why is there something rather than nothing?
Yeah. That's a big one.
That comes before the question, how did the universe begin? Because I think the universe began out of something, and I should say our universe, because there might be other universes. Why is there something rather than nothing? And God probably knows the answer to that question.
Yeah. At the risk of being really academic, I was once reading a series of logical refutations of how a logician approaches refuting God. And they go through all these arguments.
That was by Rebecca Goldstein.
Yes. I thought that was by her.
She's a friend of mine.
Yeah. I thought that was by her. And I love that.
She's a wonderful thinker and writer.
Right. And a lot of these kind of like the way that she goes through every claim about God and sort of logically refutes it. One of them, of course, is why is there something rather than nothing? And if I'm remembering correctly, her answer to that is like, well, you're saying that something had to come from nothing. So something is an exception to the rule that something must come from nothing. And you're saying, well, God is the exception. But then that just passes the buck, because then you say, well, what made God?
Right.
And so God is the thing that doesn't need to come from something.
Yeah, the uncaused cause.
But then she just says, well, why can't the universe be the one exception to the rule? I don't know.
Well, the problem with that is that God is understood by most religious traditions, is an unphysical being, an unphysical entity outside of time and space. And the universe is a physical thing. Exists in time and space. So it seems to me it's of a different nature. And therefore, the question doesn't apply equally to God and to the universe.
Okay, fair. I'm not going to go far down that road. You know me, 2 feet in the humanities
That's as
here.
much as I can say. I can't go any further down the road either.
Well, Alan, all right, let's do one more, because I think this is a great question for you. It wouldn't be as interesting a question for me, but like, give me another one. So that's a great. You see, now you have the God's special power. So he answered why there's something instead of nothing. What's another
the
one?
second thing I would ask God is, how did the universe begin? Because it's a question that we will never know the answer to. We can have our theories, but we won't know the answer to that. I have some friends, some biology friends who were interested in the question of how did life begin on Earth. That of course is an extremely interesting question, but to me, it's not as fundamental as how did the universe begin.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, all the trillions upon trillions of stars were all once smaller than the size of a single atom.
Yeah.
I must say. I mean, I feel like it used to be it's in the size of a basketball, but now they went down to atom, and I'm like, a basketball I could understand, but
yeah, that's because we've been able to push back physics to an earlier era. Well, especially if you're a sports fan, it's nice to think that it was the size of a basketball.
That's right. Maybe that's it. I love basketball. So. All right. Well, look, Alan, I want to take, we had a question coming from the audience just now. I want to take this. So Robin asks, Alan, what is your earliest memory of standing in awe? Great question, Robin. Thank you.
My earliest memory is when I was about 11 years old. And I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and I was in one of the bedrooms of my family home. I heard a train go down a train track a couple of miles away. And suddenly I felt like I was transported to outer space, and I was just floating among the galaxies. It was kind of an out-of-body experience. And I became aware that I was an insignificant speck in the cosmos. And I was about 11 years old when that happened.
Wow.
I don't know exactly why it happened, but it's something that I'll never forget. And it was, I think, my first memory of standing in awe of the cosmos. But the feeling of awe was coupled with a feeling of how tiny I was, and that it didn't really matter to the universe, that I did not matter much to the universe. So it was a feeling of smallness coupled with a feeling of the vastness of the universe.
That's a lot for an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
Well, you're a special guy, so I don't know if my 11-year-old is thinking about that. He's thinking about his fantasy football team. But Alan, thank you for that question, Robin. That's a great question. I had one other question that I wanted to get to, which is that, so you are a scientist, and so I think you're very interested in kind of the scientific progress and AI. In part of the PBS show, you talk to a robot who looks like a human and sounds like a human, and certainly that technology is moving at warp speed now. Right. But you're also an artist who writes books, and I saw there was something online recently that I saw some article about how some new company wants to publish 8,000 AI generated novels next year, or it was something like that. Whatever the statistic was for that company, every producer of content is thinking about AI and kind of can
Right.
robots basically replace human beings as writers. So I think you're somebody who is sort of at an interesting kind of intersection here, as somebody who's interested in the science, and maybe is kind of thinks the science might have some good benefits. But as an artist, I'm wondering, do you feel, as many artists do these days, threatened by that or
Yeah.
uneasy about it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the AI, whichever particular one it is, that's going to write 8,000 novels, they're going to steal material from all the novels that have been written and are available online. I mean, that's how AI is trained. That's how they look at everything that's available on the internet. So that machine is going to be stealing material from all the novels that have been written and all the love stories and the plots and everything. So it won't be creating it from scratch. I have recently been sent letters and documents to sign this, to say that I am joining a group of writers, a large group that want a regulation preventing the books that I have written to be used as training ground for computers and for AI.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a theft of intellectual property.
And would you sign that? I mean, did you sign it?
I would sign it. I did.
Yeah.
Sign
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
It's a theft of intellectual property, but it's very hard to regulate and enforce that. I think that AI is also going to do a lot of good in the future. I think, especially in the medical profession, where it can look at lots of organisms with mutated DNA and figure out what vaccines would work. You know, what are particular patterns of DNA in people that have illnesses, and figure out what vaccines might be effective. So I think there will be a lot of beneficial applications of AI, but it is going to ask us, force us to question, what does it mean to be human? Because you know, sometime in the future, all of us are going to be part human and part machine. Right now, you can implant a computer chip in a paralyzed person's brain that allows them to move a robot arm by pure thought. And we're evolving into something that you might call Homo techno rather than Homo sapiens. And we're going to have to think very hard about what it means to be human and which of our human qualities are going to be preserved in Homo techno, this new species that we're evolving into. And AI is going to be playing a big role in that.
Well, let me ask you then, what qualities do you hope are preserved? What qualities do you fear won't be preserved in this Homo techno world we're heading into?
Well, I don't know which ones I fear will not be preserved, but some of the qualities I hope that will be preserved is our compassion for other people, and our ability to fall in love, our appreciation of beauty, our sense of awe at the natural world, our curiosity. Those are some of the things that I hope will be preserved.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Alan, this has been an absolute delight. Folks, the book is called The Miraculous from the Material. Alan, I have one final question for you, which I ask everybody who comes on the show. So just imagine the ideal reader for The Miraculous from the Material, and they've read the book, they've just finished, they put it in their lap, they look out the window. Describe in a phrase or even a single word, what is the feeling that this reader has?
Well, I can state sort of an idea, but it's not quite a feeling. Well, if you ask me just for feeling, I would say renewed appreciation for the world. But the idea that I hope readers would be left with is that you can be appreciative of the beauty of the natural world and all of its miraculous phenomena and still maintain a scientific worldview, which is something that you said at the beginning of your program.
Yeah. And there shouldn't be any fear that the more you learn about science, sort of the less beautiful the world will become.
Exactly. I think when you learn the scientific explanation for things, for me, it just increases my admiration and appreciation of the phenomena. It doesn't diminish, it increases it.
And I've heard you talk about falling in love. This is a topic that you talk about love, and you write quite beautifully about love. But I've heard you talk about the science of love and about how, the science of falling in love can't quite be totally explained now, but at some point it will be. Do you think?
I don't think it ever will be.
Oh, you don't think it ever will be? But
no,
I guess,
yeah.
But just my question about that would just be like things like that, like if the joy of like love at first sight, or the first time you laid eyes upon the person you were going to make your life partner or whatever, you feel even then, like imagine it could be explained in some crazy math equation by a computer, like that it wouldn't even take away the beauty of that.
I don't think that it ever will be explained. And I hope that it's never explained. I certainly don't want a computer to be able to predict who I'm going to fall in love with. But I think that the brain, I think falling in love is one of our mental experiences. And I don't mean to take away from it at all by saying that. And our mental experiences take place in the brain, but the brain is so complicated that I think even when we know how all the neurons work in the brain, that we're not going to be able to really predict what 100 billion of them will do when they're all interacting with each other.
But if I may, Alan, I feel like I heard the romantic in you there, that you were saying that you love things are explained, and when things are explained by science, it enhances and certainly doesn't decrease their beauty. But falling in love, you don't really want to know.
There's some things I don't want to explain. And there's my favorite quote by Albert Einstein, and you began your program by quoting him, is that the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the emotion that lies at the cradle of true art and true science. The mysterious. And I think the mysterious, even though I'm a scientist, I think the mysterious has great power. I think it's what stimulates our creativity. It provokes us. It's part of our marvel at being in the world. And I salute the mysterious.
We're going to end there. What a great place to end. We at the Thoughtful Bro also salute the mysterious. Alan, thank you so much, folks. The book is called The Miraculous from the Material. It's a wonderful gift book. It's a wonderful gift in any time of year, but especially now. Beautiful photos and essays. Alan, it's been a particular treat for me, given the influence you've had on me as a writer, from Einstein's dreams all the way till now. So thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, folks, we'll see you next time on Thoughtful Bro.